Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Zach. So I'm going to start with sharing my trip preparation with you. Part A, making mental lists. Drive your dry cleaning around for 3 weeks and never drop it off at the cleaners. Think about cleaning out the bathroom cupboards. I thought about it every day. Send 100 emails the 2 days before you go to tell everyone at church what to do. Go to the library, check out books to bring, read them and have to bring them back because they were overdue and they were too heavy anyway. That's part A. Here's part B, making lists that are mental. Contemplating getting a new tattoo. I'm thinking of Phoenix. Maybe I should do it in Des Moines because who knows what kind of unsanitary tattoo parlors there are overseas. And I do know somebody in Boulder. Maybe I should drive to Boulder before we go to get a tattoo. What if I get sick in Vietnam? I'd better bring all the prescription and all the Advil because are there even drugstores in Vietnam? What about the plants? Should I kill them all now or wait until they are dead and dried up? And can stare reproachfully at me when I return. Part C, mentally stimulating lists of things to do while you are listening to death metal music the night before leaving. Put everything in suitcase and take it out at least 5 times so it's right. Put the passport in a special place and forget where. Run around the house looking for the shoes you gave away last week to Goodwill. Ask Roland, what did you do with my brush? And finally, remember to breathe and give it all over to Source. Well, I had a lot of fun writing that and acting it out. So I want to start with reminding you that on the web page, there's an old-fashioned section called Sunday Extras. And it has something from the olden days when boys used to go, extra, extra, read all about it. There's a picture of a little guy with a newspaper. Like I said, you may not remember, but in the olden days we had newspapers and people would stand on corners and shout, extra, extra. But on Sunday Extras, I have links to things I show, a little bit of extra for almost every week. So you can go there. And it's a long list. And I keep adding on to it, so I'll probably keep about 2 months up at a time. So the links that I'm going to talk about today are right on there. And we've been talking about inspiration. Last week, we talked about those wings. Create your wings. Recognize you're an aspect of divinity. Just do it. Be on fire with what you're on fire about. Week before, talked a little bit about inspiration is personal. And the fact that we should treat ourselves and everybody else with kindness because there is a God traveling around inside us. Now, I just want to check with my special effects team up there. I want to make sure I made it clear to start at the beginning and then stop. Okay, you guys are awesome. I'm going to turn off the lights. This is a TED Talk, just 5 minutes of a TED Talk. So let it wail, guys.
My son and the iPhone were born 3 weeks apart in June 2007. So while those early adopters were lined up outside waiting to get their hands on this amazing new gadget, I was stuck at home with my hands full of something else that was sending out constant notifications. A miserable, colicky baby who would only sleep in a moving stroller with complete silence. I literally was walking 10 to 15 miles a day, and the baby weight came off. That part was great. But man, was I bored. Before motherhood, I had been a journalist who rushed off when the Concorde crashed. I was one of the first people into Belgrade when there was a revolution in Serbia. Now, I was exhausted. This walking went on for weeks. It was only until about 3 months in that something shifted, though. As I pounded the pavement, my mind started to wander too. And I began imagining what I would do when I finally did sleep again. So the colic did fade, and I finally got an iPhone, and I put all of those hours of wandering into action. I created my dream job hosting a public radio show. So there was no more rushing off to war zones, but thanks to my new smartphone, I could be a mother and a journalist. I could be on the playground and on Twitter at the same time. Yeah, well, when I thought that, when the technology came in and took over, that is when I hit a wall. So I want you to picture this. You host a podcast, and you have to prove that the investment of precious public radio dollars in you is worth it. My goal was to increase my audience size tenfold. So one day, I sat down to brainstorm, as you do, and I came up barren. And this was different than writer's block, right? It wasn't like there was something there waiting to be unearthed. There was just nothing. And so I started to think back, like, when was the last time I actually had a good idea? Yeah, it was when I was pushing that damn stroller. Now, all the cracks in my day were filled with phone time. I checked the headlines while I waited for my latte. I updated my calendar while I was sitting on the couch. Texting turned every spare moment into a chance to show to my coworkers and my dear husband what a responsive person I was. Or at least it was a chance to find another perfect couch for my page on Pinterest. I realized that I was never bored. And anyway, don't only boring people get bored? But then I started to wonder what actually happens to us when we get bored? Or more importantly, what happens to us if we never get bored? And what could happen if we got rid of this human emotion entirely? I started talking to neuroscientists and cognitive psychologists, and what they told me was fascinating. It turns out that when you get bored, you ignite a network in your brain called the default mode. So our body, it goes on autopilot while we're folding the laundry or we're walking to work, but actually that is when our brain gets really busy. Here's boredom researcher Dr. Sandy Mann.
Once you start daydreaming and allow your mind to really wander, you start thinking a little bit beyond the conscious, a little bit into the subconscious, which allows sort of different connections to take place. It's really awesome, actually.
Totally awesome, right? So this is my brain in an fMRI, and I learned that in the default mode, that is when we connect disparate ideas, we solve some of our most nagging problems, and we do something called autobiographical planning. This is when we look back at our lives, we take note of the big moments, we create a personal narrative, and then we set goals, and we figure out what steps we need to take to reach them. But now we chill out on the couch, also while updating a Google Doc or replying to email. We call it getting shit done. But here's what neuroscientist Dr. Daniel Levison says we're actually doing.
Every time you shift your attention from one thing to another, the brain has to engage a neurochemical switch that uses up nutrients in the brain to accomplish that. So if you're attempting to multitask, doing 4 or 5 things at once, you're not actually doing 4 or 5 things at once because the brain doesn't work that way. Instead, you're rapidly shifting from one thing to the next, depleting neural resources as you go.
So switch, you're using glucose.
Exactly right, and we have a limited supply of that stuff.
So a decade ago, we shifted our attention at work every 3 minutes. Now we do it every 45 seconds, and we do it all day long. The average person checks email 74 times a day and switches tasks on their computer 566 times a day. I discovered all this talking to Professor of Informatics, Dr. Gloria Mark.
So we find that when people are stressed, they tend to shift their attention more rapidly. We also found, strangely enough, we find that the shorter amount of sleep that a person gets, the more likely they are to check Facebook. So we're in this vicious, habitual cycle.
But could this cycle be broken? Like, what would happen if we broke this vicious cycle? Maybe my listeners could help me find out.
So that's about as much as I want to leave you with for today. You can see the rest of that talk, but that was a lot to think about. Who has a phone that they carry with them? Have you ever lost it? I left my phone in the airport in Denver. I thought I was going to, I thought it was going to end my life for 3 days. And that was a couple of years ago. So what are we going to do about that? What are we going to do about it? This woman, Manoush, went on to pose a bored and brilliant challenge. She has 6 challenges about what to do to try to get to that default mode, the boring mode. But first I want to talk a little bit about how, I love science. I love it when science shows us the way our brain works, what's good for us. But isn't it interesting that science is echoing the spiritual teachers? The spiritual teachers that tell us to pause. The spiritual connection of the story of Jesus in the desert for 40 days being tempted before he started his ministry. The story of the Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree, determined not to move until he had found enlightenment. The story of Charles Fillmore, co-founder of Unity with his wife Myrtle Fillmore, who, noticing that Myrtle had started praying and meditating and getting healed, he said, well, I'm going to experiment with this. So every day he would sit in his parlor, I guess people had parlors then, in a chair for 3 or 4 hours, waiting for Spirit to speak to him. He did that day after day. And then that's when he started getting connected up to Spirit and had all these creative ideas. So this is it's definitely, they're not talking about God, they're talking about creativity and what we need for health, what we need for our health, how to not be stressed, how to not deplete our brains. But it is, of course, very spiritual. We need this space. And if I could climb on a soapbox, people, and say, it's what we need. It is what we need. We need to give ourselves this mental, spiritual space. It's funny, watching this this week when I was researching it, I was laughing because, I'm researching on the internet. I get an idea, I research on the internet, and I carry it out. But then I recognize the irony of that for sure. But I felt a little bit of fire burning in me again. Like, wow, what if here, every Sunday morning, we can create some space? I can try and be as boring as possible for you. And we can encourage we can ask Kyle to quit singing good songs, whatever. I'm joking. I'm running with that. But it's not about being boring as much as it is about relaxing, allowing ourselves to breathe out. The phone thing, I realized I get anxious if I don't have my phone in my pocket. I went into a restaurant last night and I realized that the phone was in the car. Should I go get it? Why? It's a habit we've all developed, and I believe that we can spiritually claim back our space, right? We can claim back our space. You can follow the challenge. The actual challenge is, it's a 6-day challenge. The first day you keep your phone in your pocket for while you're traveling. If you're walking, on a bus, driving, keep it in your pocket, don't answer it. The second day, you take a photo-free day. Wow, spend a whole day not taking any photos, just remembering. The third day, you delete an app. Oh. You delete the app that has control over you. And y'all know what I'm talking about, because it's different for everybody. The fourth day, you take a vocation, you craft an away message and put it on your email or your whatever, all the things where people ding you, dong you, whatever, and you take a day off. Day 5, you make one small observation. You go somewhere to a public place and you just notice somebody, something. Give yourself time. You do that. Day 6 is a pretty interesting one about creativity. There was a whole other rabbit hole I disappeared learning about this artist named Nina, and I forget how to say her last name. But she has a challenge of, here you have to get bored first and then do some creativity. So her suggestions for getting bored are pretty brilliant. Fill a pot full of water and watch it boil. And if you don't have a pot and water, you take a piece of paper, maybe half the size of 8.5 by 11, and you write 0, 1, 0, 1 till you fill up the whole paper. Then you've reached the boredom state, ready to create. Her artistic challenge was, which you can listen to and read about on the link on the webpage, is create a dream. Open your wallet, take the credit cards, the money, the pictures, and create a mini dream house and take a photo of it. So that was an interesting challenge. So have fun with any of that if you want to, but what I want to light a fire in all of us is maybe the noticing and the stopping. Make a conscious effort to spend time without your phone. When I return, I'll set up some counseling appointments for those of us who need it. But the fire I have is, wow, we have this golden opportunity here. That's the thing we do best. We create the space. People come to the gong meditation because when you come in here, you just have the gong and the bowls, and you stop, and you create that space for God to come in. There's that quote that a lot of people say in different ways. The crack is where the light comes in, right? The broken spot is where the light comes in. How is God ever going to talk to you if your day is so scheduled with appointments that there's no room for inspiration? Even if there was some divine inspiration, and, I want you to go, hit that wall and make some water come out of it. Well, I'm sorry, but I've got a dentist appointment, and after that I'm going shopping, and I have to go do yoga. So it's not going to work. So we could keep creating space for all of us and more people. What if we became this awesome place in Des Moines where we held the space that when you walk in here, Sunday, and you get to have a little space. Singing events, we're going to come and we're going to have a choir in November. Any of the meditation events. Yesterday, the people did energy work with us, and that was a very spacious thing. So I believe that our world is crying out for space and rest, right? That mental rest, and that we need to give ourselves that. Like I beg all of us, give ourselves a little rest, and also come together as a community and create it together, because it is awesome. And that the cracks in the space when there's a bunch of people lying around with their mind wandering, it's awesome. One person with a mind wandering is great. You get a house made out of credit cards and it looks cute and there's some photos and you get to be artistic. But a bunch of people with the intention of hooking up to pure source, to spirit, to their true self, hanging out, letting their minds wander. Wow, who knows what we're going to come up with next? Let's take an offering for unity. Invite you to take your offering, your